Tonight on The Buzz, we are looking at the business of running a creative business. Can we still earn a living in today's market? Tonight, we'll find out. We start with Paul Babb, head of worldwide marketing for Maxon and a creative artist in his own right. Tonight, he shares his perspective as a visual artist himself on how to work with clients while running a successful creative business. Next, Australia-based Mark Toia is an award-winning commercial director. Tonight, we discuss how to cope with competition and how to convert our creativity into cash. Next, Tom Jennings began his career as a print journalist before founding 1895 Films in 2012. Since then, he's produced more than 400 documentaries for network and cable television. Tonight, he tells us what it takes for a creative business to succeed and how he pitches programs to the networks. Next, Steve Weiss co-founded Zacuto in 1983 after almost 20 years as a commercial photographer and director. During that time, he's developed strong opinions on what makes a creative business successful, and tonight he explains what he's learned. The Buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
authoritative.
One show serves a worldwide network of media professionals.
Current.
Uniting industry experts,
Production.
filmmakers,
Post-production.
and content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. Running a successful creative business is a subject I've been interested in for a long time. First, because that describes my own business, but more importantly, it describes everyone in our audience. From my perspective, it has never been harder to succeed as a business than in today's environment. So tonight, we hear from 4 successful creative artists on what they've learned in running their own businesses. All 4 began as individuals, and all 4 expanded their skills into running successful companies. I found all of these interviews extremely insightful, and I look forward to sharing them with you this evening. Also, as a note, James DeRuvo is on assignment this week and will return next Thursday. By the way, if you enjoy The Buzz, please give us a positive rating and review in the iTunes store. We appreciate your support to help us grow our audience. I'll be back with Paul Babb from Maxon right after this. Here's another website I want to introduce you to, DoddleNews.com. Doddle News gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. Doddle News also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. Doddle News is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, DoddleNews.com. Paul Babb is the head of worldwide marketing for Maxon, as well as a creative artist and designer with more than 20 years' experience in 3D animation, visual effects, motion graphics, and graphic design. Hello, Paul. Welcome back.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me on again.
And many, many congratulations on your new title.
Thank you, sir.
Paul, on tonight's show, we're focusing on the business side of media. Most folks are working in smaller companies and don't have a lot of resources, and we're all feeling the pinch of competition. What does it take to run a successful creative business?
Well, I think that the first thing that has to come into mind is what are the goals of the creative work that you're doing? Some creatives, not all, some creatives will get lost in the woods of the creative aspects of it, what they want it to be and what they would like it to be. I know in the early days of my career, one of the first questions I would ask a client is, what do they want to see accomplished by this creative work that's going to be done? Certainly creative work, and the more creative work is engaging and eye-catching and inspiring. But I think you have to take into account, what are the goals of this work that you're creating? How is the client going to see success from this creative work you're doing?
That raises, for me, one of the most intriguing questions, which is, when do we and how do we decide to stop working on a project when we've met the client's expectations or our own expectations?
I think it depends on the client and the budget. All those things have to be balanced. The clients will sometimes have unrealistic expectations. Certainly you have to temper those. You have to, educate your clients as well as be able to fulfill their expectations as best you can. When I would do that, literally my first question would be, well, what are our goals here? What do we want to accomplish? And then that would a lot of times direct the project itself and the goals of that project. And then at that point, you can start tempering. If a client says they want to take over the world, you have to find ways to temper that. Okay, so let's talk about this particular part of the market before we start taking over the world. I think you have to find a balance of both. I think you have to find a place where the client is getting what they need, or at least satisfied that they're getting what they need, and that you're able to find some fulfillment in it. I know the creative part of me, you'll love to be able to point to something and say, I created that. And especially if it's something that catches the eye of other designers who go, that was a great idea, or that was cool, or a nice implementation. But I think sometimes that balancing that with what the client needs can be very difficult.
I want to go into that just a little bit more. You've used the word balance and used the word temper. How do we get clients to pay for the creativity they expect?
I think that has to be put down on paper and set very clear expectations. I learned that the hard way early in my career with freelance work, that people don't always want to pay what you're worth. I think you have to make it very clear what your costs are, what it costs to make revisions, the stages. Once we've reached this stage of approval, if we end up going back, that's going to incur additional cost. You just have to be completely upfront with those types of things and make it very clear so that there's there can be no gray area in quoting out a job for a client.
So it sounds like you really expect to have all this written down ahead of time, as opposed to just a verbal agreement of, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, and I learned the hard way on that. When I mention revisions, that's typically where you get killed. You start off, let's say you start off with a 3D project, and you built the models, and you haven't done any texturing or lighting, and you've done some basic animation, but you've got the guts of it there, and you want to get the client's approval at that point, and then you move forward, and they decide, I'd like to change that to a car instead of a bicycle. Well, you've gone back to the guts of the project and have to make some major changes, because frankly, clients don't understand how much work goes into these things. They don't know how complex it is. I'm going to go back to dinosaur ages. There was a time when I was building interactive CDs and DVDs for corporations as a freelancer, and they would come back to me and want to make text changes to some of the interactive presentation materials that I had developed for them. But what they didn't realize was, these were being built in Director back in the day, and once you go in and make changes, you have to recompile basically it's a small application you're recompiling, and then you had to burn those onto DVDs or CDs at the time. And then you had to test those on multiple machines. So it wasn't just going in and making a minor change to the text. It was the entire process of recompiling and burning and testing. And so I learned up front that I had to explain that and say, look, this is the process it takes to make those changes, and this is why that, the hours cost that much. If I did it very early in the relationship with the client, it was much more amenable to them. But if you hit them at the time when they came back and they're raving because, it's just a couple of words, why is this costing so much? So their expectations are, not there, basically.
I want Maxon to be wildly successful. and have a huge customer base of people who are happily using your software.
Thank you.
But from a creative point of view, I've suddenly got a whole lot more competitors that are using the same software that I am. What do we need to do to distinguish ourselves from the competition? Because I still need to pay the rent.
I think your distinguishing factor is who you are and the type of work you do. A lot of freelance and small studios, have fallen into specializing a little bit. Like the guys out at Perception in New York are doing they started off doing a lot of futuristic user interface in films, and then that branched them out to working on realistic interfaces for cars, but they were able to kind of specialize in that area and sort of branch out from there. I think it's the work you do. It's the style of the work you do. It's your approach to the market. It's really about the content more than anything else. As I always say the paintbrush is not as interesting as the painting itself, and you have to differentiate yourself as an artist. Even when we're talking about the difference between creative and business, but you really do differentiate yourself as the way you approach the work as an artist.
Where does client relations come in?
Client relation comes in right at the beginning. That's another way you differentiate yourself, is how you work with a client. Again, when I did it, my first job was to sit down and talk with them and I'm a marketing person. I was a creative, but I was a marketing person. And the first thought was, okay, so what are you trying to accomplish with this particular campaign? It might even change the way you approach the campaign. Maybe they come to you and say, hey, we think we need a complete revamp of our website, and we want to approach people this way. We're going to do a big email campaign. And as you're talking through, you realize, this would work way better as a social media campaign, and this is way you could reach people better this way. A lot of times it wasn't just, here, make me a pretty picture. It was more, okay, let's talk about this entire campaign, what your goals are, how you're going to reach people. And a lot of times clients come to you with ideas that, they haven't quite gotten cooked all the way through. Sometimes you have to help them cook them a little and add a little bit different spice to it, and that type of thing. But client relations comes in the very beginning, and that relationship is key to the success of what you're doing for them and your success, I think, because think about that, word of mouth. I think, Maxon and Cinema 4D have grown in this market because of word of mouth and the way we've treated our customers and built community.
Maxon has a mantra of 4 words: engage, inspire, educate, and motivate. How do you use that within the company?
Those are my words, basically. That very much was the way I approached the market. I don't know if it's a global wording, but you grabbed onto my mantra. Engage is we work and we are markets artists. The best way to engage artists is with interesting art, interesting projects, creativity. Look at the market was built on people wanting to do special effects like Star Wars or the things that they've seen. They got engaged by that work and became inspired by the idea of doing it themselves. Inspiring them, the way I approach that is put the artists out there and let them show people how they did it and show them, wow, it's not that hard, and it's really more about me expressing myself as an artist. I can learn how to do this. That's like, hey, I can actually do this. That's the inspiration. Education is key. 3D is hard. We have to give people the tools to be able to learn the product and be able to understand how to do with it what they want to do. And motivation is, we also know, and I know from experience, that the old mantra, 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. You've got to sit down and do the work of learning the tools and practicing, and every artist has to sit down and play to get to where they are good at creating what they want to create. And so we try to find ways of motivating them to get in there and do their projects, contests, or inviting people out to demo, giving them that carrot, but I'd love to demo for Maxon one day, so I want to create that kind of work, and the other artists out there with them. That's kind of the gist of it.
One last question before I let you go. How can we make sure that we're focused on making our business successful and not just simply turning out creative projects?
I think, again, that's clients. You're going to be successful and you're going to gain more clients when other people see what you've done for your current clients. So, for instance, Barton Damer in Houston started out as a freelancer doing, a little bit of 3D work here and there. He created some incredible work for Nike. his work was so inspiring and so engaging and was so successful for Nike that he became very sought after. He now has a studio. I think he's got 15 people, and he's become extremely successful. And it comes from the fact that he was able to create some incredibly creative work that was extremely impactful for his client. And other people see that and go, "Boy, I want that. I want that for my product." Balancing that creativity and impact that you can have for a client to make sure that what you're creating is helping them reach their goals as well.
Paul, for people that want more on the creative products that Maxon offers, where can they go on the web?
Maxon.net.
A very simple web URL, maxon.net, maxon.net, and Paul Babb is the head of worldwide marketing for Maxon. And Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Larry.
This interview is the second half of a discussion we recorded a couple of weeks ago with Mark Toia. Mark began working as a small-town steel worker, but he evolved into an award-winning commercial photographer and director based in Brisbane, Australia. Hello, Mark. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry.
Mark, a few weeks ago, we talked about your ideas on production. This week, I want to ask you about what it takes to succeed in media today. What advice do you give students?
One thing I'd love to talk about is the youth of the day, because I mentor a lot of young kids, as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a subject in there too about personal motivation, you know what I mean?
Two things I would love to talk to you about. One is whether there's still a business in the business, because so many people are struggling because the competition is so severe.
Yeah.
And then whether we should encourage kids to go into the business, because it is not an easy life, as you know, and you're near the top of the pyramid. And I'm always concerned about a kid that walks up and says, I'm going to film school and I'm going to become a director. Like your teacher, I would still in good conscience say, well, have a plan B if it falls through.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't want you to starve to death.
Well, yeah, maybe that is a different topic, and it's a very good one actually, because which I'd share feverishly. Yeah, I get a lot of people saying the same thing, but if they're not going to put any effort into it and they're not highly creative, end result is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? Now, there is a business side of this, which I've put a lot of energy into. The business side of marketing yourself and getting yourself out to the world, that is a business in itself. And if you ignore that and just hope that you're going to ride along on your creative expertise, you're going to get a rude shock.
We are past the days of if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well and truly. I mean, look, end of the day, it's like, a young musician, right? It's more than just one song. It's 1,000 moons need to be aligned. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my daughter's in the music game, and end of the day, it's a very, very, very tough business, and she's very skilled at it. But she needs a lot of things to align for her to be successful.
And moral support along the way.
Yeah, making a great song isn't going to make you the star, or isn't going to sell unless you have a huge machine behind you to get you out to the masses.
Yep.
I went to a seminar, must have been 25 years ago. It was called Dale Carnegie, this guy's name was. I'm not sure if you remember. So this fellow stood up and he said, no one will use you if they don't know you exist. and that was another burning thing that stuck in my head, Yeah, it was very much something that drove me too. So I just made sure that, a massive percentage of my business was actually put into that business sales, marketing, as well as trying to be highly creative. So that's where you got two jobs in one, right? You're successful not by just my creativity, but almost also my my business sense,
That's huge. People think it's all creativity, but you still got to collect the check at the end of the day.
No, look, you sound very much like a realist, so I'm sure I'm not talking to the... I'm talking to the converted, no doubt.
I have run two companies, and my proudest statement is that I never missed a payroll. And to me, that is the triumph of running a business.
Yeah, same. My wife and I, we're the quickest payers in the business. If we do a job, we ask people to like send us the check. I'll bring your invoice on the day. Or if like we will scream at people for not giving us an invoice earlier.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because some suppliers, they just will give it to you when they realise they've got no money in the bank, and then they'll chase through their accounts and go, "Oh shit, I haven't been paid by Mark." But we'll get it well before that,
Yeah.
But we pride ourselves in quick payment. But people go, "I want to go to film school." I said, "No, well, don't do that. Why don't you go and do business marketing first, as a degree? If you want to go to uni so bad, go and do that, and do your film and TV on the side." You know what I mean? But that's the important one.
It is important to know how to light and how to frame, and to be a cinematographer is an art in itself, but it's such a small part of the art that they lose sight of the fact that if you can light and can't run a business, you starve to death.
Yeah, that's right. You will starve. You might be able to light amazingly, but you're going to starve. Yeah. I mean, I always talk about this one particular guy. He lived on a boat that was literally sinking in the river, and he's from England, English guy, and I befriended him. He was quite, he's quite eccentric, but I would have to say he was probably the best photographer, cinematographer, director I've ever met in my entire life. He is a one-in-a-lifetime guru, right? And he's as poor as a church mouse.
Yep.
I don't even know if he's still around. I mean, that was years ago when I met him. But when I saw his body of work, his personal stuff, I went, oh my God, this is like off the charts, incredible. And even to this day. Now, he could not win a job, introduce a job, save his life. Everyone thought he was the guru, but he had not a smidge of business sense. He tried to work with producers that, tried to convert him and make him into a superpower, but he wouldn't listen,
Wow.
to good advice. But oh, what a wasted talent. And then again, and here's another angle too, Larry. I know a guy that's a very average photographer, a guy that's, he's solid. He's solid, but he's not like top shelf, right?
Yep.
But he does very, very, very well, right? And the reason why he does well is because he markets and he's created a business and he's amazing with clients and he delivers everything that he says he's going to deliver, because he manages expectations so beautifully and he lives happily ever after. But at the end of the day, his body of work is out of 1 to 10, it's probably a 6. But he knows that, okay, I'm not super duper creative, but I'm a great businessman, right? So he's done well purely because of that business model.
Mark, for people that want to track the work that you're doing and hire you for their next gig, where can they go on the web to learn more?
Toia.com. There's enough there to wet everyone's whistle.
More than wet their whistle. It will leave your jaw on the floor. The website is toia.com. And Mark Toia is the first master with Frame.io and an unbelievable cinematographer and director in his own right. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
And thank you.
Tom Jennings is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker and journalist. He has written, produced, and directed more than 400 hours of programming for such networks as CBS, Discovery, National Geographic, and many more. Hello, Tom. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Tonight, we're looking at the business of running a creative business. What are the most important things to keep in mind when you are a creative?
When you're a creative and you run your own business, it's a double-edged sword in that half my time is spent being creative and half my time is figuring out who in the network world is buying what do they want, how much are they going to pay, and what can I find that will fit what they're looking for so that we can continue to be creative. It's the ultimate creative commerce catch-22.
How do you determine how much they're going to pay?
There's various ways. There are various newsletters that can inform you on who's paying what. If you happen to be signed to an agency, oftentimes they'll have like a ballpark figure The network executives, if you know them, they'll give you, like a range of like, here's what we're paying for an hour. But they're not going to, their range will usually skew low based on what they think that they can get your creative output for. It's kind of like studying the news today with all of the craziness out there. You want to get as informed as possible from as many different sources as possible so that when you go in, you know the value of what you have, what the market will bear, so that when you give them that number, whatever it is, you can feel confident in that you've hit a spot that they can feel good about, and you know you can make it and still make a living doing it.
Well, let's pretend that you've just landed a new client. What are the most important things to keep in mind when you're starting to work with a new client that are not creative-based?
The first thing, study what they actually are putting on the air. And I say that because I have had network executives tell me in meetings that they've had producers come in and pitch them an idea, and the network executive will have to respond, do you watch our network Tuesdays at 9? Because that show is airing right now. Producers will come to me and say, this would be great for the History Channel, for example. And it'll be some hardcore old school History Channel style programming. And History Channel has evolved greatly over the years. And I'll say, do you know what the History Channel is airing, or Discovery, or any of the networks that might, you think might go on this? And invariably they'll say no. And I say, well, you need to study what they're doing first, because they're just going to look at you as someone who's not informed, who didn't do their homework, and who didn't come ready to give them something new and fresh that extends beyond what they already have. So the first thing is you have to do your homework and understand who you're talking to and what they want.
But let me push back on that. How often do networks want something original versus something which is derivative?
They always want something original. What you usually wind up selling is something that's a derivative, however. It's very hard to give them something completely brand new that's outside their wheelhouse. What they want, I can tell you a few things that they want for sure, whether it's a derivative or brand new, is they want something they can't get anywhere else. You have to have made a deal with an author, for example, or you have to have found, say, we do a lot of history programming. We discovered that a university in the UK has come up with something in Egypt that's going to change how we see the world from 2,000 years ago, and nobody else knows about it yet. We have to find photographic evidence that some major moment in history is not what we thought. So what they want is exclusivity and something that they can promote as brand new content, regardless of how it's presented, in a way that they've never seen before. And the other aspect, just the last kind of part of the table, is they want talent almost always. They're looking for ongoing series that can be run again and again and again, hopefully with a person or a group of people that the audience will want to tune in and see regardless of what they're talking about.
Is talent more important than story?
I think many times, yes. Not always. I think you need to still tell a great story, but if you have a very dynamic host telling you that story, I mean, look at someone like Morgan Freeman, for example, on National Geographic, doing The Story of God. It's a very good series. It's great. But when you put Morgan Freeman, his voice and his journey into that, because it is his personal journey around the world, people are just going to get that much more interested because he's an actor that people like so much. So, yeah, I would say if you have a series starring Morgan Freeman, it's going to get a lot more notice when you're walking into the room than if you have a narrator who just happens to narrate a lot of television shows.
Well, let's switch back to business again. Mm-hmm. You've successfully created more than 400 hours of programming in a business that you've run successfully for 15 years. Mm-hmm. For people who are starting out their own media production company, what advice do you have for them?
You have to be in it for the duration, whether it's nonfiction documentary like what we do, or people that come to Los Angeles and to Hollywood with stars in their eyes about being actors or producers or directors. Regardless of what you're doing, you just have to look at it as your career, even if you don't have one yet. This is just what you do. And you don't have to be rabid about it. You just have to put your head down and go. And you have to gather all the information you can. You have to keep your ear to the ground. You have to stay focused on what it is you want, and then be willing to alter and tailor your goals in order to meet the doors that are opening for you. I mean, you know, I started out as a newspaper reporter. I had no clue that I was going to be doing documentary films, you know, so many years after college. But the door opened. I walked through it. I took a screenwriting class just because when I arrived in Los Angeles, everyone was writing screenplays, and I thought I should see what it's about. And I remember the teacher said that in order to succeed in this business, and I think it's true for nonfiction production as well, if you have to be the person that knocks on 1,001 doors instead of 1,000, if you and that means you will create your own luck. You know, people say, oh, it was lucky. Well, it was lucky because it was 5 years in the making. You walk through that door if you have the talent, and then you succeed. So if you have the talent and you create your own luck and you look at this work as your profession and not some pie in the sky dream, it'll happen eventually. It always does.
What mix of people do you recommend band together to start a company? Should they all be filmmakers?
No. Those are going to be the people that filmmakers know, but they should have people, you know, we have a young woman at our company who was 2 years ago, she came in as right out of college. She was a production assistant, you know, getting coffee. And this does answer your question. And I, you know, when people seem really engaged in being a part of who we are, you know, I try and sit them down at some point when there's a minute during the day, and I'll say, you know, you're doing a great job. What is it that you want to do? You know, you don't want to be doing lunch runs for the rest of your life. And immediately she said, I want to run a post department. Now, to creative people, running a post department is an anathema. Who wants to do deliverables to networks? But this young woman said that's what she wanted. You know, my first response was, well, why? You know, why would you want to do that? And she said, I did it in school and I really enjoyed it. I liked being at that end, which, you know, for people who may not know, it's basically when the film is locked, then there's like a whole nother 50%, which is much more like the business of the delivery, which is the mixing and color correcting is the creative part. But then there's all the clearances that have to go in, all the promotional material, all the tech specs have to be checked. All the masters have to be delivered in a certain way. It's a lot of minutia. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, we're ramping up right now, and I need somebody to handle posting these next 3 shows that we had coming. Said, if you want to give it a shot, you know, just listen to what myself and the supervising producer, we've been through these wars before with post. And now, you know, this year we're doing like 22, 23 hours of programming, and she runs the post department and she runs it like a top. So you need to find people that have interests that are connected to what you're doing, but not necessarily, you know, everybody who wants to go out and say action.
Being in business, as you know, is constant. It's frustrating. It's a lot of pressure. How do you keep focused on doing what you want to do and not get burned out?
That's a great question, because you can argue. Years ago, I would have said, well, I need to make my rent payment. So it's always the scramble. But then you kind of get into more of the rhythm. You're more of a regular amongst the networks. They all kind of know you, or they'll at least take your calls. You wind up selling 1 out of every 20 phone calls or pitches. There's something really rewarding when you get to the end of the creative process, when you get to that last picture lock, when all the music is laid in and you sit in a darkened room and you watch it, and it might have taken a year or two to get this thing finished the way you love it. And then you just sit there and you watch it, and for a moment, you can stop directing the thing in your head and just be an audience member, and then you realize you made this. That's the magic of it. Sadly, those moments are few and far between. Not that there isn't always magic, but most of it, 98% of the work is work. It's either the creative side or the business side. Just push, push, push. And then you get to sit back and watch what you've done and realize you've taken an idea that was in your head from the ether and made something that millions of people are going to watch. And that's a thrill. And that's why I keep doing it.
Tom, for people that want more information about the projects that you and your team are creating, where can they go on the web?
They can go to our company website and they'll see all of our past shows, most of them, and upcoming shows, of which we have many. And that is www.1895films, plural.com. It's 1895films.com. And the company is named for the first year of the motion picture camera, when the Lumiere brothers first had a theatrical projection of a motion picture in France in December 1895. So coming up on the anniversary again.
That website is 1895films.com, and Tom Jennings is the founder of 1895 Films and an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Larry, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
I want to introduce you to a new website, Thalo.com. Thalo is an artist community and networking site for creative people to connect, be inspired, and showcase their creativity. Thalo.com features content from around the world with a global perspective on all things creative. Thalo is the place for creative folks to learn, collaborate, market, and sell their works. Thalo is a part of Thalo Arts, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with the resources you need to succeed. Visit Thalo.com and discover how their community can help you connect, learn, and succeed. That's Thalo.com. Steve Weiss is the co-founder of and the creative director for Zacuto, but he also has more than 40 years' experience as a photographer and director for corporate commercials and fashions, with numerous awards to his credit. Hello, Steve. Welcome.
Hey, Larry. How's it going?
Steve, Zacuto makes products for visually creative individuals, which I do want to talk about. But to start with tonight, I'd like you to wear your director photographer hat, because I want to talk about the business of the business. You ready?
Yes, I am.
So here's the core question. Let's get right to the heart of it. Is it still possible to make a living in media today?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, I'm going to tell you what we used to do, and you can do what you want to do. But in the early 80s, we decided that we wanted to see videos in department stores where fashion could come to life. And that sounds like the dumbest thing you ever heard right now, because you go into a department store and there's like 700 monitors in there. But at that time, in the early 80s, we used to rent 165 monitors and 3/4-inch machines and put them in department stores all over the country to play videos that we made for various manufacturers like IV Diffusion, Karen, Christian Dior, all these different companies. So the idea is if you create a market, you don't have to compete against anyone. 3, 4 years, 5 years into it, we started to get people that were trying to underbid us, and then the sort of industry went down. So what did we do? We move on to something else, create a new niche. We started doing these things called corporate documentaries, which were new at the time. or companies that had a history like Firestone, Masonite, Sears, that all date back to the Vagabonds. I don't know if you know who they are.
Tell me who the Vagabonds were.
The Vagabonds, you can look them up on Google, was Harvey Mason, Thomas Edison, Sears was in there. All of these people that were like the industrialists would go camping, and they called themselves the Vagabonds. And we ended up going to many of these vagabond companies and saying, we need to tell your story in a video. And then they would use these for various different, uses at trade shows and on television. And so that was a market we created. And then after that, we decided we want to get into another market. My advice to people is try to come up with a niche where you don't have to compete with people. Every time you got to compete with people, the price just goes down. And it gets back to your original premise. How do you make money in media?
It sounds like you're saying that you don't want creative people to be a jack of all trades. You want them to focus and specialize.
Yeah, that's what I've done my whole life. Even Zacuto was focusing on a very particular type of way we do balance and equipment. I agree with that. I like to invent and create, whether it's a market, a product, or anything. It's got to be new and different. The second you do something new and different, you go to the customer and there's nobody else to compete with you. That's how I do it. I'm not saying everybody can do it that way. You can go and bid on, a video for McDonald's, and I have done videos for McDonald's, but it's harder now. Now you got to compete, and you got to have the right price, and it's a different type of model. It's not for me, but I'm not saying it's not doable.
Well, this is a good time to ask about the kind of products that Zacuto makes. Just give a description of what it is that you guys create.
Well, we create camera accessories and pretty much the premier electronic viewfinder in the industry. So our focus has always been on looking at these various new cameras as they come out, or even long before they come out, especially with the whole advent of the DSLRs and small production grade cameras and the original Varicams and stuff like that. What can we bring to this as filmmakers for, X amount of years to really make the thing better? Jens and I kind of have this philosophy: if we can't make something better, we're just not going to make something. We never made a matte box because we just can't come up with an idea that's better than the ones that are out there. So why not just use those? That's just our thing. We like to invent things, come up with new things, and I would encourage other people to do the same. That's what makes America great.
Okay, so let's switch the gears now. One of the challenges that you have is similar to a challenge that any creative person has, which is trying to find customers. And in your case, you're talking to camera people who are across all different industries and all different genders and all different age groups. There's no simple description that you can have of who owns a camera that could buy your gear. What do you do to find new customers when there's no easy target to go after?
Well, I might not be answering your question exactly, but you started off one way and then you finished another. So I'm going to go with what you started with, which is a topic that I absolutely love and have talked about many times. One, two dudes get together that are both like into filmmaking and they say, let's start a production company. Bad idea. Terrible idea.
Why?
Because I have always had in every one of our businesses, and we've had several of them, you have a business partner that his sole job is to go out and get business. Because when you get two creative dudes that want to start a little company, the second you start doing a job, you're unemployed because you don't have people churning and burning and looking for work. Even in this business I have now, we have salespeople for Zacuto. This whole live studio business that we just started, we have two salespeople for that. I mean, I'm talking salespeople, 10-man style. There is a business aspect and then there's a creative aspect. And I hate telling people this, but the business dude is the better dude because I can get anybody to create content. And I know that's going to be painful to hear. You cannot find people to get work as easy. That's the hard part.
So in other words, you're not opposed to production companies starting. You're opposed to two creative people. In other words, two people with the same skills starting the company. You need to have a diversity of skills.
It's actually a really good way to put it because sales is an extremely creative adventure. You got to really figure out, okay, I want this dude's money and how am I going to go and get it? That's not so easy. You got to come up with a very good creative plan. So I would say they're both creative, But yes, when you refer to them as two creators of content, you don't need that. Have one creator of content, unless there's three of you, but now you got to split the money in various different ways. The business model I always like is a businessman and somebody who gets the work and somebody who does the work or manages each of those departments. That is the recipe for a successful business in any business.
So now I'm going to go to the second half of my question. We now have a company that's been started by a business person and a creative person, and they're both equally talented and they have good skills. How do they find customers?
Well, no, that's an interesting point. So now you have to sit back and you have to say, what do we want to do? Do we want to create a market or do we want to bid on projects, that are existing? So any of these types of companies, they have projects, they go out for bid and you can bid on them, and that's one way. Another way is you can come up with an interesting idea and go to a company and say, I think you should be doing this. That's one way. And a third way is to create an entire industry, a market. That's the way I like, So like I was explaining, we have this new live show business coming where we're going to have, 5 different really beautiful stages. And we're going to companies where we spend weeks developing a plan specifically for that company. And then we go and pitch them and we say, look, we think you should make these 50 videos this year so that you can rank on these various topics. You will educate, you will inform, you will not sell your brand, but people will associate that with your brand. Basically, it's what Zacuto's been doing with our content, and it's what I want to take to the world right now in a new business venture. So it's an idea. You have to do a lot of research, and you have to pitch to companies. That's what you need to do. You can't just call people and say, I got an idea. It has to be much more sophisticated than that, custom.
How do we balance between taking the revenue that we make and investing it in the company and accumulating income for future use?
Man, you are asking all the right questions. These are like the ones that when I give a lecture, these are the things I talk about. So when you do a video, and so many people, when you're younger, you want the thing to be, and I did it too, you want the piece to just be amazing. So you're not so focused on the profit motive, and at the beginning, that's okay because you're building a reel. But the way that you're supposed to run a production business is, let's say you get $30,000 to do a video. 10 right off the top is profit. Boom. You don't touch that. You now have 20 to make the thing. And that includes your salary. I'm a director. I get my director's rate, and that comes out of that budget. So does the DP, and so does the equipment. People don't charge for equipment anymore. And so does the editorial expense and outputting and everything, the various formats you have to do. All of that has to come out of that. It's like a product, like anything. You have to have a profit. You have to include your time in the cost basis of that project. I'm going to give you a little quick fact here. Most production companies only last 5 years and they go out of business. And it's because of all of these things you brought up today. 2 creative dudes, not knowing how to treat it like a business and not knowing how to create profit. Those things. They call this the film business. And I always tell people the operative word is business.
How do you see the market for creative services today? There's lots of demand. People want video. They want visuals. Mm-hmm. But are they putting money behind their interest? Or do they want everything for free?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I'm going to reference this live show business that we're doing right now where, we're asking people for $130,000 for 50 videos, which when you think about it is really inexpensive. But they're live, so they're easy to produce, and they only take us about an hour. So it's about 50 hours of work for $130,000. The numbers worked out on paper. The key is we're going to people and saying, don't worry so much about the $130,000. Why don't you go to one of your vendors and get them to put up some of the money? So sometimes the best way to get money out of people is to find a way that they don't have to pay for it. Everybody has vendors or potential sponsors. You're a creative person. Get creative. It's not just about making content. It's about even finding a way for them to find the money to make the project. But I see where you're going. The value of video and imagery has gone down now that everybody can do it so easily on their phone. Still, only 1% of everything is good. Fine that you can do it on your phone, but if it's not good, it's useless.
Steve, I could talk about this subject with you for hours, but for right now, I'm going to let you go. Where can people go on the web to learn more about Zacuto and the products that it makes?
Zacuto.com.
And Steve Weiss is the co-founder and creative director behind Zacuto, as well as many other ideas. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Larry, and I'm going to see you on my show, right?
You can count on it. You know, I was just thinking, as I tell my students, creativity is great, but you still need to pay the rent. Tonight, we looked at what it takes to pay the rent. A lot of my students feel that if you have energy, creativity, and optimism, success is likely. I'm not sure that has ever been the case, but it's certainly not true now. We need more than that. Today, with budgets decreasing and competition increasing, we need to have a compelling answer to, why should someone hire me? As Steve Weiss said, don't just bid on projects where you compete with everyone else. Create an entirely new market which you uniquely can supply. I recorded Steve's interview 2 days ago, and yesterday I played it for my students because I wanted to get their reactions to his comments. Every one of them wants to run a company someday, but as they listened to Steve talk, I could see them start to think and take notes as they realized that running a business is more than simply applying creativity to a problem. It's easy to become depressed these days. These can be difficult times, as we all know far too well, but as our guests made clear, the trick is to focus on what you do really well. Become a specialist. Then use your creativity to help your clients find new ways to connect with their audience. And those clients can range from networks to corporations to individuals. Because just as there's lots of competition arrayed against us, our clients are facing even more competition in a market where their audience is drowning in messages. The noise level is enormous. Our skills give them a chance to break through all this noise and make a direct connection with their audience. And when you think about it, finding new and creative ways to capture the attention of an audience is why we got into this business in the first place. Creativity doesn't end at the camera lens. It now extends into every facet of running a successful business. Just something I'm thinking about. I want to thank our guests this week, Paul Babb with Maxon, Mark Toia with Zoom Film and TV, Tom Jennings with 1895 Films, and Steve Weiss with Zacuto. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday morning. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner, with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Our producer is Debbie Price. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. The Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2018 by Thalo LLC.